T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power. And liftoff of SES mPOWER. Go Falcon 9, go SES.
Vehicle switching downrange.
M1D chamber pressure nominal.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, carrying the O3b mPOWER satellites to orbit. Here's a great view from the first stage, looking down at those Merlin 1D engines. Now, during the ascent, we have begun tilting the engines. That's called gimbaling. And we've begun actually moving horizontally away from the launch pad in a maneuver called a gravity turn. We're still mostly going up. As you can see, the altitude is increasing. But we're also starting to go horizontally away from the pad, and ultimately it's that horizontal speed that will get us to orbit. I apologize, I just talked over the call out there for max Q. That is the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure and the highest stresses on the vehicle during the ascent. Now, the rocket needs to go about 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid getting pulled back to Earth. So we'll be continuing to accelerate the vehicle in preparation for several events we've got coming up in about a minute. The first of those will be main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and then second engine start number 1. Now, main engine cutoff is where we shut down all 9 of these Merlin 1D engines in preparation for separation of the 2 stages, and then followed shortly after by second engine start number 1. We heard a call out there for MVAC chill-in. That means we've begun to chill in the turbo pumps on the second stage in preparation for full flow of the Merlin vacuum engine and ignition at about the T+244 mark. So again, coming up, main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and then SES-1.
Miko.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
Great views. Left-hand side of your screen is looking up through the inner stage where the Merlin vacuum is sitting. You can see that's now a first stage view of the grid fins deploying. Right-hand side of your screen is that Merlin vacuum engine having started its burn. It'll continue burning for about the next 5 minutes. Next major milestone will be deployment of the fairing halves. Now that we're high enough in the atmosphere, we can actually jettison that mass and recover the fairing halves for use on a future mission.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Great shot. On the right-hand side of your screen is the top of the payload adapter. And on the, sometimes we can catch the fairing halves jettisoning away in this view on the Merlin vacuum. Now again, we'll be attempting to retrieve these fairing halves once they fall back to planet Earth on a recovery vessel named Bob. If you're just joining us, welcome.
Acquisition of signal, Bermuda.
About T+4 minutes into today's mission, had an on-time liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida. On the left-hand side of your screen is Falcon 9's first stage, using some attitude gas to reorient itself for its next major event, which is the entry burn. And on the right-hand side of your screen, we've got a great view of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. About a minute into, excuse me, a little more than a minute into its first burn, and it is carrying the mPOWER, O3b mPOWER satellites to orbit. We're carrying 2 today on today's mission for our customer SES. Next major event is going to happen on the first stage, which is on the left-hand side of your screen. That'll be the entry burn. During the entry burn, we relight 3 of the Merlin 1D engines on the first stage. The center engine, followed shortly after by 2 of the radial engines. And we do that to slow down the vehicle. And that helps us reduce the re-entry forces and heating, and ultimately allows us to recover and reuse that first stage. So right now, the first stage is periodically doing some bursts of its attitude control gas. We're trying to get the engines pointed back towards the Earth so we can slow ourselves down once we get to the entry burn time. That in about a minute from now. Now this view is of our Merlin vacuum engine. We've got cameras on either side of the engine. You can see the glow of the nozzle from those hot exhaust gases transferring heat into the engine, and that heat is radiating away to the cool background of space. Now during re-entry on the first stage, we actually put that nice layer of soot on the first stage. That soot actually comes from flying through the rocket's exhaust gases. You can see that we're still going extremely fast, about 8,000 kilometers per hour on the first stage. That'll slow down as we do the entry burn, but the rocket's plume, which is carbon-based, ends up coming back onto the surface of the rocket and leaves that nice layer of soot that you see on our flight-proven boosters. Entry burn scheduled to start here in about 10 seconds. Keep an eye out for that on the left-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 FTS is safe.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Successful entry burn startup. This burn lasting just about a little over 20 seconds. You can see that our speed is rapidly decreasing.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And shutdown of those 3 Merlin 1D engines. Again, we do this burn to help with reusability. And really, reusability is the key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, and that enables more investments in critical scientific research and missions like today's payload. Falcon 9, the Falcon 9 first stage that supported today's mission will be performing its landing burn for the 8th time. It's previously supported a number of missions, including the cargo resupply missions 22 and 25, crewed missions 3 and 4, TWRCSat 5B, Eutelsat, Hopper 13, and a Starlink mission, and of course today's mPOWER mission. Next major event is actually shutdown of the Merlin vacuum engine
Stage 2
that we
FTS is
see
safe.
on our screen. Now, the Merlin engines are optimized for thrust in...
MVAC shutdown.
They're optimized for thrust in the vacuum of space. They actually have an extremely long nozzle compared to the Merlin 1Ds. We had our call out there for shutdown on the
Nominal orbit insertion.
on the Merlin vacuum engine, as well as a call out of nominal orbit insertion. Now, it sounds like we're having a little bit of telemetry issues with the first stage. Should have started its landing burn at about the T plus 8 minute 24 second mark.
Expected loss of signal, Cape.
So the landing burn sequence, we start a single Merlin engine on the first stage. And by now, hopefully we would have landed on our drone ship. We'll see if we can get some more information from the launch team once we get telemetry back. So at this point, the mission is not over yet. We've just completed the first of 3 burns on this Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. We're in our first parking orbit. Our next burn coming up on the second stage will be coming up after this coast phase. We'll ignite for a second time for a short burn, and then a third burn after that, a little bit longer after. So we'll see you back here in about the T plus 27 minute mark for second engine start number 2. See you back in about 17 minutes. In the meantime, enjoy the space tunes.